before you give it a try.
Only you.
Don't play with matches, don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about rigged out life, nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches, don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
So what we're going to do is we're here to expose it, let people tell their story, and let everybody in the public see the horrors of the court system in Suffolk County, New York. Hi, I'm Gary Jacobs, and welcome to another edition of Long Island Backstory. Our guest here today is Anthony Pappas from Nassau County. Anthony is a victim of the Nassau County family court system, and because of what he went through, he's become an activist for change, and he's also a professor, so he's well educated, and he likes doing his research. So he's researched a lot of the issues that are affecting him, and he set out to, I guess it's really too late to some extent to help him fully in his case and correct the damage that's been done. But Anthony is going out there trying to change the system so that other people don't have to suffer what he went through. Anthony, welcome to the show once again.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. People watching the show are going to wonder why you're here. So I think we have to just give a quick background and tell us, I don't want to do the whole case because we have a lot of issues to talk about, but what brings you here today? I guess 10 years ago you would never know about judicial immunity and family court. Why are you here today?
Well, I'm involved in a 10-year divorce case, which is still continuing in terms of there being appeals. And through that process, I've realized that we have a major systemic defect in our democracy, which is that the judges cannot be held accountable. And there's this doctrine of absolute judicial immunity, and it evolved historically through, sort of various circumstances, but it's something that, is abhorrent in terms of American traditions, and the fact that, individuals should be accountable, and they are held accountable in all aspects of life. Right. And last Tuesday, June 30th, I was at a meeting sponsored by the Citizens Union of New York. This is a good government organization dating back to like 1897. In 1901, they backed Seth Low as the candidate for mayor. He defeated the Tammany Hall candidate. Later in the 30s, they backed Fiorello LaGuardia as a good government candidate. So they were having a civic conversation, is what they called it, civic conversation about effective police accountability. And they had a panel of speakers, the borough president of Brooklyn, Eric Adams, some panelists. One of the panelists was Cyrus Vance Jr., the district attorney for New York County. And the conclusion of the civic conversation with the speakers and the panel basically was that it's urgent that we find ways to hold police accountable when they are engaged in, interactions with citizens that, have some dubious quality to them. So sometimes, people get shot. Sometimes they claim there's police brutality in terms of the arrest. There are various issues that people feel they weren't treated properly by the police, and all the speakers at this panel were adamant that there should be accountability and a way for people to get justice and fairness.
And it's interesting that we're talking about there's a whole forum about police and holding them accountable, but really police are accountable now because you can sue a police officer fairly easily for civil rights violations. They're saying they want more accountability. When we're talking about judges, there's no accountability.
Right.
So, I mean, police officers are way more accountable now than the judges.
Correct. They were pointing out that there are like 8 avenues or mechanisms on the New York City level for holding police accountable. There are 3 on the New York State level,
right,
and 2 avenues on the federal level.
And even still with that, though, they're claiming that there's still problems, that it's not enough.
Right. They're claiming you need to have independent prosecutors, that in terms of evidence collection, you can't necessarily rely on the police.
Right, but let's go back to the judges, because that's the issue that we're talking about here. But you're saying judges, you've done a lot of research on this. Right. Judges have absolute immunity. Does that mean they can break the law in their court?
Yes, basically their decisions can be against the law, against the facts. They could be irrational. They could be malicious or biased.
So if a judge comes in and says, you know what, I don't like the way Mr. Pappas looks, to their self,
right,
he reminds me of my ex-husband, so I'm just going to rule against him. I don't care what the law says. And I'm not going to listen to the facts, and I'm just going to destroy this guy. Nothing you can do?
Essentially, there's nothing that can be done. And this resulted from a Supreme Court decision going back to like 1978. The case was Stump versus Sparkman. Judge Stump was a judge in Indiana, and at that time, there was a 15-year-old girl who was called before him to appear in court. Actually, her mother was not the most responsible mothers. She felt her daughter was promiscuous and might get in trouble. She wasn't doing her homework, and she was hanging out with older men. And she suggested to the judge that the girl should be sterilized so there would not be unintended consequences. So the judge called the 15-year-old girl into the courtroom, told her, go to the hospital to have your appendix removed. The 15-year-old girl listened to the judge, so she goes to the hospital. The judge secretly told the surgeon to do a tubal ligation, meaning cut off the girl's fallopian tubes, permanently sterilizing her, and that's what happened. Now, the 15-year-old girl did not know what was happening. She thought her appendix was going to be removed. She did not have an attorney to represent her as a minor. You should appoint an attorney for someone who's a minor. And she did not have a chance to appeal the tubal ligation because, well, she's 15 years old, and she thought her appendix was being removed. So in about 2 years, she married, and she realized she could not conceive with her husband, and she discovered what had happened, that there had been a sterilization. So she attempted to sue the judge for violating due process and elementary decency, and the other people involved that were connected with the sterilization. The Circuit Court of Appeals, covering Indiana and that area, ruled in the girl's favor, and somewhat surprisingly, it went to the United States Supreme Court in Washington, D.C., and they came out with a 5-3 decision giving the judge immunity. Now, the minority opinion, which consisted of Judges Potter Stewart, Lewis Powell, and Thurgood Marshall, they dissented vigorously. They said, a judge is not free, like a loose cannon, to inflict indiscriminate damage whenever he proclaims he is acting in a judicial capacity.
Right.
They were saying this never should have happened in the United States and never has happened, so how can the majority be giving this judge immunity? But that case is still a binding precedent, and as a result from that, you have a series of bizarre and abhorrent situations arising, say prior to that and since then, where judges can be malicious or actually harm people seriously, and based on this doctrine, it's very difficult to obtain redress for any damages if the judges are acting as judges. So,
right. Well, I think the judges sort of know it because you mentioned it, as long as they're in their judicial capacity.
Correct.
And that's sort of the buzzword that they always use when people appeal these cases and say, well, the judge, just was crazy, didn't follow the law. They know what the law is, but it doesn't matter what they do. They could be, the worst thing that could happen is they get appealed, and there's no rating system. They're elected in New York, so they can get appealed. They can get overturned on appeal 30% of the time, 40%.
Right.
Nothing happens to them. I know they don't like it, but they can be overheld. Nothing happens to them.
Yeah, well, in theory, there's sort of this presumption that the appellate courts operate well and review what the lower courts do.
But the appellate courts have the same
Right.
problem.
Right, they have the same problem. Many people refer to it as a buddy system.
It's the fox watching the hen house. These are all part of the same old boys club.
Right, which is the point they were making at this civic conversation about the police. You should not have the police investigating the police and determining, what happened at the incident. Whereas here for the judges, it's, the judges reviewing the decisions of the judges, and there's no independent body that one can go to.
Well, and we have a judicial review board, but I think anybody knows that that's a joke. I mean, that's just an absolute. It's
Right.
almost not even worth writing down on a piece of paper because they barely read them. You can show black and white evidence, and they just throw it out there. The judicial review board is.
Yeah, well, what they specifically say, the New York State Commission on Judicial Conduct, is they are saying they are not they don't have authority to review a judge's decisions. They say that's done by the appellate courts. So the things they can review are things like, the judge is smoking in a no smoking zone, or the judge is naked on the beach, or they're jaywalking against the light or something like that. Right. So they specifically say we will not review the decisions of the judge. The only recourse is the appellate courts.
Which, by the way, it's easy to say, you can always go to the appeal,
right.
But it's a lot of money.
Absolutely.
So, we're not talking, it's a $35 fee. they made it, I believe, on purpose, almost impossible for the average person to appeal because they made you go through an appellate printer that charges a fortune to do it. You have to make, I don't know how many copies, but it's a huge amount of copies. Your printing costs could be most cases will be several $1,000s to get it in, and we know that the number is huge of cases that are just tossed out. I don't even think the judges read them half the time.
That's correct, and there are longer delays. So if there's something that's an emergency or a threatening situation, you don't get a decision in time
until it's too late, and then they can say it's moot.
Right, they can say it's moot.
It's no longer an issue.
Right, and even if you have a decision, by that time the circumstances change,
right.
So it's no longer applicable,
right.
And you need another decision for the different circumstances that have evolved.
And I think they just hope you go away.
True. Right, so it's a horrible system, and we need to raise awareness about this among the public, have them try to complain in a variety of ways, to the legislative and executive branches in terms of legislation. They should also try to complain to moral leaders, say religious leaders, to begin a civil rights movement about this.
Well, the problem is most people don't know about it until they're in it, and they're in it, it's too late.
True. Well, that's the...
People watching and say, who cares about judicial immunity? They're judges. They do the right thing. They follow the law.
Yeah, well, that's a myth.
And we have no cameras in the courtroom, which is a great way to protect the judges.
Yeah.
Because, the transcript only shows so much. Sometimes they're changed, sometimes they disappear, but it certainly doesn't tell the inflection, of the judge, which is important too.
Right. Well, even if you have decisions in black and white, which are, totally bizarre and absurd, then you can't get them reversed, and it shows.
Well, I also think the judges know they know the wording. They know to put in there that it's the opinion of the judge after seeing the demeanor, or having the people before them. I made a decision, based on that, not just the facts, but what I've seen. And how do you argue that? That's.
Yeah. Well, again, that's one of the defects. The appellate courts defer to the opinion of the judge who was able to.
They say, well, they saw the person; they were in front of them.
Right. Except the judge could be biased or could be lying, or they could just be
and also
malicious.
A lot of people by the time they get to the court system, they're so beat up, that it's really not that person. They act differently when they're in the courtroom. How does one act when their children are ripped from them? They lose their livelihood. Their bank accounts are being decimated by attorneys. How do you act?
Yeah, many people don't comprehend what's happening to them. They don't have the wherewithal and sophistication to understand how the system works.
Most people, the first time they ever went into court is when they get a divorce.
Right. Some haven't finished high school. Some are immigrants that don't speak English well, so they're trapped in this system, and they despair and commit suicide. And then the atrocity of the system is there's no investigation of the suicides. The attitude
I think they're happy they went away, and they say that, what? They were probably crazy anyway. Look, they killed themselves. They were crazy.
Yeah,
They deserve this.
Well, their attitude is case closed. Our workload has been reduced. Let's go on to the next case, and
you're saying it like it's cold, but I've seen it.
Yeah,
it drives a lot of mostly men to commit suicide or attempt suicide, and then that attempted suicide is used against them to damage them even more.
Right, and well, it happens to women also. Mary Richardson Kennedy hanged herself on the barn on the Wednesday after Mother's Day in 2012. She would have been the niece by marriage to President John F. Kennedy if he had not been assassinated. She was married to his brother Robert Kennedy, who also was assassinated, so she was the daughter-in-law to Robert F. Kennedy, and she had 4 children. So, she had lawyers, she was well off. She had her family supporting her. She had some friends in the Kennedy family who were friendly to her. So why is it that she supposedly gets a decision from a judge, and on the Wednesday after Mother's Day, she goes, hangs herself in the barn? Well, there's no investigation of this, right? So if it happened in any other circumstances, like I'm a professor. So if there's a student and I'm the last person the student has seen, and after the student has been in my office for a conference, the student goes and jumps in front of the train, they'd say, what happened with the last person he saw?
Right.
And if they find that I wrote something bizarre on the student's test paper, well, you're a terrorist, or something totally crazy, there would be an uproar, right? But in my case, you can have bizarre written statements about terrorism. So one in particular.
Well, we're not going to have time to get into it because we're running out of time today.
Okay.
But Professor, I appreciate what you're doing. Yeah, I feel bad for what's happened in the system, but you know what? At least you're fighting back. You're not rolling over. I'm sure the judge knows that you're fighting back. Hopefully you'll make a difference in your case, and hopefully you'll be able to get change so that everybody else who goes into the courts doesn't have to deal with this. I'm Gary Jacobs, and thank you for joining us at Long Island Backstory.
It's springtime in the forest of the black-tailed deer. The young male is feeling playful. It's time for tag. The female flicks her ears. Her way of saying, "Catch me if you can."
Never know it on the battlefield, but nearly half of today's military are National Guard and reservists. However, they can't answer our nation's call without their employer's support. If you're an employer, visit esgr.org and find out how to do your part. After all, their response depends on yours.
All over America, people are taking the National Radon Test. Have you?
You put me on the spot.
Have you heard of radon?
I never thought about it. I don't know.
I think it's a secret killer or a silent killer.
Poison gas that seeps into the house.
It's one of the tests we did with the inspector before buying the home.
Why worry about it?
Why worry? Take the National Radon Test. True or false? Radon is the second leading cause of lung cancer.
True. I'd say false.
No, it's true.
I thought of cigarettes and then pollution.
That's something new to me.
Radon can penetrate a concrete block.
It's false.
False? False?
It's true.
I wouldn't know how they could protect you from that.
It's scary.
The Office of the Surgeon General recommends all homes be tested for radon.
False?
It's true.
True?
I should know about it because I worked in the hospital for many years.
So that's bad. We should get our house tested.
Sure, I'm gonna call it.
1-800-SOS-RADON. How can you not call?
1-800-SOS-RADON.
RADON.
I propose 3 cheers for those we leave behind.
Congratulations.
It's in paper now.
Good job. Congratulations. Proud of you. All right. Ensign Elliott. Who's going to salute him? Guys, who gets to salute him first?
The 2-1.
Hi, I'm Barry Bonds for RAD, Recording Artists, Actors, and Athletes Against Drunk Driving. In my league, we hit home runs without a designated hitter. But if you want to get home safe, there should always be a designated driver. So when you're with someone who is drinking, take their keys. Call a cab or drive them home yourself. because friends don't let friends drive drunk.
Your generous support has made it possible for United Way to help build strong communities across America for over 100 years. Thank you. Now more than ever, it's crucial that we maintain the strength and vitality of our neighborhoods, towns, and cities. United Way is active in local communities 365 days a year, making a measurable difference in the lives of Americans. Helping local communities identify pressing issues and opportunities and committing the resources necessary to address them. United Way helps to strengthen America one community at a time. Your local United Way has relied on your generous support for years. Your community is counting on you. Please continue to support your local United Way. Strong communities mean a stronger America.
Think being a big brother means you always have to be a perfect role model?
Nice.
Think again. To learn more about becoming a big brother or big sister, call 1-888-412-BIGS.
Look, there's a moose. Where? Over there. Oh, yeah. Look, over there. I see a fish. A fish with 2 stripes.
Spend time with kids anytime, and it helps prevent crime. It's that easy.
When I have an asthma attack, I feel scared. Sometimes my parents have to take me to the hospital. I feel like a fish with no water.
You know how to react to their asthma attacks. Here's how to prevent them. Call 1-866-NO-ATTACKS. Visit www.noattacks.org or call your doctor. Because even one attack is one too many.